Today I talk about how I try to search for secrets. Welcome to episode number 9 of the Luebbers journey. So this is something that has been coming more and more to the forefront of my attention as the core of my operating system and what allows me to make an impact on the world in the way that I do, and to succeed in many cases where others haven't been able to. And I'll give some specific examples. But what I mean by search for secrets is essentially, what are the things that are nuggets of pure gold that if you knew them, you'd be able to build a massively profitable business, or succeed in a crowded marketplace, or push through to the top, or in the context of even a social market, like a social circle or a group of friends, gain a more prestigious place or a more connected place, something of that nature. What I'm talking about are things that are lying in plain sight, but nobody thinks to question them. So I've heard a lot of metaphors around icebergs and things of that nature, and I think that's a good way to look at it. You can think of our perception of things as the tip of an iceberg, and the more we question the assumptions of our perception and the assumptions of a situation, the more we're delving down and down into what's really beneath the surface. What is deeper than what most people perceive in a situation? And it's about taking the things that everybody takes for granted and asking, why is this necessarily the case? What are the alternatives? And what would the effect of the alternatives be? And what is the trade-off? Having this situation as opposed to all the other possibilities, what does this gain? And what does this lose? And some specific examples are, I saw an amazing video on YouTube the other day about architecture and how architecture grew. If you look at Stonehenge and some of these incredible ways that indigenous and ancient cultures would build things out of rocks to communicate meaning, they started building not actually necessarily for the case of protection from the elements, but in order to create meaning. And so architecture always, throughout the ages, in some way represented an expression of thought, not merely utility, but actually, in a sense, language. It conveyed something about reality and impacted the way that people saw the world around them and looked at spaces in general. And today we tend to think of spaces very much, average spaces like houses, as pretty utilitarian. I mean, they have colors, they have things on the outside that we can say, that's pretty, that's a nice house, I like that color scheme. But in general, we don't think about, why are doors placed in the center of a house? Why are rooms always square? Why are skyscrapers typically in this shape? And as a result, we've sort of lost this awareness that the spaces of our lives dramatically interact the way we see ourselves as part of society and culture, and the way that we relate to other people. I mean, the very fact that the default is living in some area with walls is actually not the norm throughout human history, but because it's the norm now, it has deep implications in the way that we see ourselves as social units, and maybe more individual as opposed to less a part of society. But nobody really questions, well, why do we have walls? That's sort of just taken for granted. And this theme of questioning the things that everybody takes for granted and asking, what are the alternatives, and what do we lose or gain by making this trade-off of the current situation? This activity is difficult because it involves questioning your initial perception of a situation, but it's incredibly valuable. And I'll give you an example in which it's been immensely valuable to me. So that my introduction to online business was through a course called Zero to Launch, about starting a profitable online business. And the default path for people in this course is to take a look at their skills, figure out which ones they can monetize, find an audience that has a problem that they can solve, aggregate that audience by putting out content and demonstrating that you have some level of authority and expertise in this field, and then building a product, usually in the form of some type of online course or other product on the internet that can solve this problem extremely well. And I actually built my entire second business by questioning one of these assumptions, which is, does this have to be an online product? And a lot of people in this course would get frustrated because they went into it wanting to start an online business, wanting to make a significant amount of side income or maybe completely replace their current income. And they found that it takes a while to build up an audience. It's just a long process. Unless you go viral overnight, it takes a long time to build up an audience that's willing to pay, and even if you do go viral, it's usually not the highest quality audience, so it can take a while to get up to a sizable amount of income. But there's actually an alternative, which is you can, once you have an audience, or even when you have only a small audience, you can monetize earlier. You can ask, well, why do I have to wait until I have X number of people, 1,000, 100, 12,500 people until I can launch this product? Why can't I instead just find one person and then launch a product to them at a higher price point in a more valuable way, and then use that to generate a more significant source of income so that I can perhaps transition out of my full-time employment and get out of this job sooner, and then build up a more passive online product. This was an assumption that was sort of even mentioned in the course, but most people thought, well, yeah, that's not for me. What I did was I would teach people how, once they've identified a skill set they can monetize, I would show them how to find just one person that was willing to pay them a higher price point so that they could generate some sort of real income without sort of following all of the steps. And so that's a specific example. There are a lot of them. I don't want to fill up this entire video, though, but I may touch on it in the future because it's really at the core of my operating system. It's one of the most important skills that I've learned, and I think some of my training in physics and philosophy has instilled me with this, but I've always had a tendency to look beneath the surface and question, why is this default the default? And what do we gain from having this as a default, and what do we lose? What are the other options, and what would they provide us? All the way down to, why do we have walls? Why are houses built the way that they're built? Why do we communicate in the way that we do? What are the implications of communicating through phones? There are so many different areas where the default is just taken for granted, and by questioning, why is this the case? You can both deeper understand the current situation and find value in that, or even propose an entirely different default that can provide massive value. I hope this thought was valuable. It's a really important part of my operating system. And if you have any instances of sort of seeing beneath the surface and going, wow, I didn't realize that this was not necessarily the case, or the impact of this default. If you have any sort of epiphanies of looking beneath the surface, write them in the comments below. I would love to hear them. All right, guys, take care.